We're next going to talk about tackling shoplifting, and it's probably really useful, Alex, for you just to flesh out a little more as to what you think the public will see different in terms of police response and partnership work over the next 12 months as they go through 2024 and responding to the significant increases in volumes that we've seen in the shoplifting crime type.
So if you don't catch a shoplifter red-handed, if you like, one of the number one ways is through facial recognition retrospectively from CCTV images. And I'm pleased to say in the last year we've really improved the ability, the digital capability of the organisation, so that when you contact the police, a very simple link is sent over that can be sent over from a police officer's mobile phone to you as a shopkeeper. You just drag and drop your CCTV in there and it goes onto our evidence management system and it's just there available to be viewed by a number of officers. It's really good, and we are hoping in the next year to open that up so you don't actually need to contact the police to get the link. You can just send the footage straight off. But Richard has been working on our response to shoplifting and working on what we can do to improve, so I thought I'd hand over to Richard who can just flesh that out a bit.
Okay.
So that point is important. I understand that members of the public appreciate police officer attendance. There'll be many instances where our attendance is necessary and beneficial. As the Chief's alluded to, there are instances where the person's identity isn't known, there's not an immediate arrest we can make. So retrieval of the evidence and the submission of the CCTV is the immediate step, and that can be done in an efficient way that enables us to target some of the offenders without going out to collect that CCTV. And then we will always, in every case, examine that CCTV, establish if an identification has been made, and ensure that it's circulated amongst all officers to enable them to try and identify the offender. In respect of offenders themselves, members of the public may not always see the action that we're taking, would be another point I'd make. So there are numerous instances that we may go into shortly from the last week or so where offenders have been arrested for a shoplifting incident, and we've then researched other crimes that they may have been responsible for, and they've been charged with 5, 6 or more offences. And we will also take opportunities to try and ensure that we limit their future offending, either through the imposition of bail conditions or application for civil orders that prevent their access to certain premises where they've committed offences at. So the public may not always see all of the action that we're taking. It will be offender focused. We will take every opportunity to tackle individuals who are repeatedly stealing from the same stores. But that initial step of securing all available evidence is really important. Investigating, particularly when it comes to shoplifting, is fundamentally preventative. And going back to our previous conversation regarding our attendance when people have been detained by store detectives, we are absolutely committed to attending those instances. The 57% non-attendance figure isn't good enough, because it's only by intervening, getting someone in custody, that we can frequently make links to other offences that they've committed. So a number of steps we're taking, from making it easier for people to submit information to us, CCTV, and then targeting the offender rather than individual offences that they may be responsible for.
So just building on that, if you don't mind, Commissioner, the way our call handlers work, as we've mentioned a couple of times already, is about threat, harm and risk. But what we're instituting for the new year is, regardless of that, if you have someone in custody for shop theft, we'll respond within an hour. Obviously, we'll respond much quicker if that person creates a threat. And I had the privilege of just being with C-Team Response in Hereford only a couple of weeks ago, and one officer there, a relatively new officer, had arrested a shoplifter, researched all the crime reports that he was associated to, and was able to charge him with 27 shop thefts. It was a brilliant result, and so that's the work that Rich is talking about, and that needs to happen much more.
Could I ask about timing in this? Because we had several comments about evidence not being gathered within a month or not at all. Could you, one of the questions was really well about what's your approach to gathering statements in a sort of an acceptable time frame?
Yes, so whereas we'll respond very quickly if there's a prisoner, clearly an officer under the supervision of their normally sergeant will have a number of crimes they're investigating, as well as often responding to crimes in progress. So, for example, a response officer. And most of our crimes are held by our response teams who also respond to 999 and 101 calls. And they might have 10, 15, sometimes even 20 crimes that they're investigating, and they will follow a needs basis. Now, if it is a shoplifting and they don't feel there's an imminent risk, or they've had some days off, unfortunately there will be circumstances when it takes some time to collect that evidence. Now, try and do that as expeditiously as possible, but sometimes that can take a long time. Having said that, it's clear from the national strategy and the policy that Rich is bringing in that all reasonable lines of inquiry should be followed. So if there's CCTV or good witness testimony, then it should be taken, and it should be taken in a reasonable time.
Some of our contributors have mentioned that they welcomed seeing the PCSO pop in, a member of their local policing team popping in, and indeed on a daily basis they report and checking on concerns and staff wellbeing and all those kinds of things. We also had some feedback from some of the community around the role that the We Don't Like Crime team would have in terms of crime prevention. We've also had some negatives around a fairly high value theft where it was actually overnight, where burglars stole around a significant amount of cash, but then they didn't get a very good We Don't Like Crime preventative experience afterwards. They get what they describe as a poster to put up, and that's it, as it were. In your view, Alex, how do we get best around preventing shoplifting? The PDM principle about being judged about the absence of crime rather than detecting it. How do we shift away from intervening more effectively when crime has happened to stop it happening again, but also more effectively about stopping it happening in the first place? And what role do you see as the police in doing that, and indeed how do I assist as Commissioner?
Thank you. Well, if I could be vaguely controversial for a while and criticise Robert Peel, our founder of the British Bobby, I do think one of the most preventative things we can do is focus on the prolific offender, bring him to justice, get them remanded in custody, because that stops. If you take the offender out, the equation works. There's no offender to commit the offence. Having said that, situational crime prevention, which is making it as difficult as possible to prevent the crime in the first place, is also a very successful technique, and I think that's what Robert Peel probably refers to. And there's,
you can't ask him.
You can't ask him, no, and in fact, I think there's a fair amount of evidence to say he never wrote PDM principles, but that's by the by. They're really good principles, and I do buy into them. So how do you prevent crime other than getting justice for victims and removing the offender? And there's all sorts of things that can be done. Awareness, how the shop is laid out, physical deterrence. So store detectives are fantastic, and you can see stores doing this. The valuable stuff is behind secure cabinets. Loss prevention is a key requirement for stores. Many stores engage in that. So there's all sorts of things that we can do, the community can do, and the shopkeeper can do. And a combination of all of that, as well as catching the offender, is key. And if we go back to the criminological theory of what you need for an offence to take place, is a motivated offender, a ready market, if you like, a victim, and the absence of a capable guardian. If you remove any of those three, you make a difference on the equation. And so the preventative side says, okay, let's make this really difficult to steal. Let's create the deterrent, either with a store detective, a policy of intervention, or police officers and PCSOs regularly patrolling the hotspots and the most important shops as far as shop theft is concerned.
I know you enjoy a good anecdote, Alex, but I recently visited a retail premise who had a high prevalence of shoplifting, which was ironically next door to a police station. They reported to me that they don't see police officers. And in fact, I did the test of, well, is that weekly, monthly, whatever? They just said we don't see them. And if a retail premise next to a police station isn't currently seeing them, how do you have some confidence that the changes you're making will mean that actually that is unusual, or indeed out of kilter with the experience of the rest of the community across West Mercia?
So this is where our planning for next year, which we've done with you, comes hopefully to fruition. Now, retail premises are clearly spread across our whole geography, both rural and towns. The vast majority of retail outlets are in towns and town centres. And sometimes our neighbourhood officers who operate in those town centres also cover outlying areas, and they're spread across the whole area. When most of the people and most of the harm is based in the town centre. So what we've committed to do with you over the next year is invest in town centre teams. So in town centre teams, in some of our largest towns across West Mercia, those neighbourhood officers would reside, work and patrol only in those town centres. That means they're not pulled off to go to other areas, and they get to know the retailers very well. They understand which shops are most vulnerable, which aren't. They work with them to prevent crime. But also they respond, as you'd expect a neighbourhood officer to. And when someone is in need, they've got someone, perhaps the patrol officer is too far away, I'd expect the neighbourhood officer to go and make the arrest. So I think that's a huge advancement, and I'm hopeful that will create a positive effect over the next year.
We talked a little bit about retailers and the action they can take, and indeed things like shop watch and those kind of things. One of the contributors asked why West Mercia Police can't take part in initiatives such as DISC, which is a similar system used by akin to shop watch, for those that don't know what it is watching. Other forces use it, and indeed I know it's been used here in West Mercia as well. Is there a force stance around things like DISC, or indeed what the organisation would engage with?
Yeah, so I'm really grateful for that person who wrote into you, because it made me look at DISC, and I looked at this prior to meeting us, and the costing of it is unclear, but it looks really good. Now, we sort of have a version of it using our platform that is called Neighbourhood Matters, but we have a senior officer lead who is responsible for our policy response in relation to shoplifting, and I will send her DISC and see what's in it, because I think it looks really good. When communities mobilise against a crime, it can make a really big difference, and that is what this is about. So it's sort of like crowd-enabled, here's the offenders, here's the hotspots, keep a lookout for these individuals with communication with policing. I think it looks very good, so I'm very happy to explore it with our senior policy.
The benefit of being here a while is that I know that DISC has operated in West Mercia's geography in my time as Commissioner, and it's how, and I asked a question earlier around what do I need to do to support, and I know we've referred to earlier about some of the officer investments that will be in next year's budget, but how do I also support around supporting to ensure that the community have the right resources as well as the police to support community-led initiatives such as whether it be DISC or others? What role would you see me playing?
Well, if we take this, for example, I'd like to dive into it more, see what the implications are. I don't know why it failed here previously or why it just was stopped being used, but it's not just the police that beat crime, it is communities that beat crime. When communities are involved in tackling crime, it's much more effective, I think, and it builds better relationships with policing. Commissioner, I know you have a commissioning budget. I know you are a huge supporter of interventions like smart water, and I'd be very happy to come back to you once we've looked at DISC and see what the implications are, and see if funding can be made available, if indeed that is what's necessary.